I finally opened my late husband's safety deposit box, expecting his papers. Then the bank manager whispered, "Someone tried to GET in before you." When he turned the security monitor toward me, my revenge began. The bank manager did not speak at first. He only looked at me with a pale face and trembling hands, then slowly turned the black security monitor toward me. My breath caught so hard it felt like my chest had locked shut. There on the screen was my daughter-in-law Vanessa, standing outside my late husband's safety deposit box room 2 days earlier, wearing dark glasses and a neat blue coat, smiling at the front desk like she belonged there. But that was not the part that made my knees weak. The part that nearly made me fall was the man standing beside her, holding a folder in his hand, my own son, Daniel. My dead husband had been buried for only 3 weeks, so why were they already trying to get into his box before I even knew what was inside it? And what were they so desperate to hide from me? My name is Margaret Hayes, and I was 69 years old the day I learned that grief can make you weak, but betrayal can wake you up like cold water in the face. Until that moment, I thought I was coming to the bank to collect old papers, maybe a will, maybe insurance forms, maybe one of Harold's many careful notes written in his neat square handwriting. My husband believed in records. He labeled everything. He saved every receipt, every family photo, every birthday card I ever gave him. If Harold put something in that safety deposit box, I believed it was important, but I never imagined it could be dangerous. The bank manager, Mr. Collins, cleared his throat. His voice came out low, almost apologetic. "Mrs. Hayes, I did not let them in. Your husband left very clear instructions. No one was allowed access unless you were present with identification after his death certificate was filed." He paused and looked at me carefully. "But your son and his wife were very upset when I refused. They claimed you were sick, confused, and that they were helping manage your affairs." Sick, confused. Those words strung more than I expected. I kept staring at the frozen image on the monitor. Vanessa had one hand on Daniel's arm, the way she always did when she wanted to control the room without looking controlling. She had perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect little size, and perfect manners, at least in public. She called me Mom in a sweet voice that always sounded a little too polished, like she had practiced it in a mirror. Daniel, my only child, looked tired in the video, nervous, smaller than I remembered, even though he was a grown man of 42. "I asked who it was," I said quietly, though I had already seen them. Mr. Collins looked down. "It was your son and daughter-in-law." For a long moment, I said nothing. I only pressed my gloved hands against the edge of the desk, so no one would see them shake. Around us, the bank looked too normal. A printer hummed. Someone laughed softly across the lobby. A pen rolled somewhere and tapped against tile. It felt wrong, that the world could still move like that when mine had just cracked open. "I would still like to open the box," I said. Mr. Collins nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Hayes. But before we go in, there is something else you should know." They did not just ask once. They came back twice. That made me lift my head. "Twice, sir?" "Yes." He swallowed. "The second time your daughter-in-law brought documents she claimed gave her temporary authority over family property. Our legal desk rejected them. They were incomplete. Possibly altered. Possibly altered." I heard Harold's voice inside my head. The same steady voice he used when he fixed broken things around the house. "Slow down, Maggie. Look closely. The truth always leaves fingerprints." Harold had said that many times over our 46 years together. Usually he said it when something small went missing, or when a neighbor's story did not quite make sense, or when Daniel told one of his weak little lies as a boy. Back then, the lies were about broken lamps and muddy shoes. Now, apparently, they were about legal papers in dead men's property. I nodded once. Take me to the box. As we walked down the quiet hallway, my low heels clicking against the polished floor, I felt like I was walking into two places at once, the bank vault in front of me and the long dark tunnel of my own marriage behind me. Harold and I were not perfect. No marriages, but we had built a life brick by brick, through layoffs, miscarriages, car trouble, hospital visits, and the kind of bills that make you sit at the kitchen table at midnight with your hands over your face. Harold had been a mechanic for most of his life, then later owned a small repair shop on the edge of town. It was not fancy, but it fed us. It paid for Daniel's school clothes and Little League fees and college books. It kept the lights on. Daniel used to adore his father. As a little boy, he would follow Harold into the garage and sit on an upside-down bucket asking 100 questions while Harold worked. What does this wrench do? Why is that part shiny? Can engines hear us? Harold would laugh and answer every question like it mattered. A boy who asks questions, he used to say, won't grow into a fool. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Or maybe, if I was being honest, Daniel changed slowly, and I did what too many mothers do. I kept excusing it. Because love can be blind when it wears a mother's face. Mr. Collins opened the vault room and stepped aside. Inside were rows of little metal doors, plain and cold and secretive. He led me to one in the middle. He inserted his key, then handed me mine. The one Harold had made me keep in the back of my jewelry box for someday. I had hated that word, someday. It had sounded so distant when he said it years ago. Now, it felt cruel. My fingers slipped as I tried to fit the key in. Take your time, Mr. Collins said gently. The lock clicked. He removed the long metal box and placed it on a private table in a small room nearby. Then he closed the door behind us, giving me a silence so deep I could hear my own pulse. I opened the lid. Inside was not what I expected. There were papers, yes, but not just papers. There was a thick brown envelope with my name written across the front in Harold's handwriting. There was a flash drive. There was a small velvet pouch. And under all of that was a second envelope with red ink across the front that said, if Daniel or Vanessa tried to open this without Margait, something is very wrong. I stared at those words until my vision blurred. Mr. Collins saw the envelope and took a small step back. Would you like privacy? No, I whispered. No, stay. Because suddenly, I did not want to be alone. My hands shook as I picked up the envelope with my name first. The flap had already been loosened by time. Inside was a letter. My dearest Maggie, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I am sorry for that. I know you hate when I prepare for the worst, but some men feel storms before the clouds arrive. For the last year, I have been seeing things that troubled me deeply. I wanted to believe I was mistaken. I prayed I was mistaken. But if Daniel and Vanessa rushed to this box before you, then I was not mistaken at all. A cold chill crept up my arms. I kept reading. There are things about our son's finances and Vanessa's pressure on him that you do not fully know. I tried to shield you because your heart is soft and because I hoped Daniel would come to his senses. But hope is not the same as truth. Inside this box is proof of money taken, signatures copied, and plans discussed behind our backs. If I am right, they were waiting for me to die so they could force you out of the house and sell the garage property before you knew what was happening. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Mr. Collins made a small, startled noise. Mrs. Hayes, I lifted a hand to stop him. I had to keep going. The next lines were worse. I also believe Daniel does not fully understand what Vanessa has done in his name. He is guilty of weakness, secrecy, and greed, but I fear she has pushed him farther than he realizes. Listen carefully before you act, but do act. Do not let silence bury you beside me. A tear dropped onto the page. Harold knew he knew, and he had died carrying that weight. I pressed the letter to my chest for one trembling second, then put it down and reached for the second envelope, the one with the red writing. Inside were copies of property records, bank statements, and printed emails. I did not yet read every page, only enough to feel the room tilt around me. There were references to the house, our house, the one Harold and I had lived in for 38 years. There were papers mentioning transfer plans, loan discussions, a fake caregiving arrangement. My name typed in places I had never signed. Then I saw one sentence in a printed email that made my stomach turn. Once Harold is gone, Margaret will be too confused to fight us. I knew that sentence had come from Vanessa before I even checked the sender line. It had her voice all over it, cold, neat, smiling while it cut. For one strange second, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because sometimes pain gets so sharp it twists into something else, confused me. Vanessa had mistaken grief for weakness. That was going to be her first mistake. The second mistake had been trying to get into this box before me. I wiped my face, sat up straighter, and kept going through the papers. The flash drive likely held more. The velvet pouch held Harold's old gold wedding band, the one he stopped wearing when his fingers for you to keep close. The drive is the key. If anything happens to me suddenly, do not trust quick tears, rushed paperwork, or family pressure. Go to Laura Bennett first. She knows everything. Laura Bennett, our old family lawyer. My breath caught again. Harold had not used Laura in years, but he trusted her more than anyone. Mr. Collins looked worried now. Should I call someone for you? Yes, I said. My voice sounded different, firmer than it had all morning. Call me a taxi. Not my son. Not anyone from my family. Just a taxi. He nodded at once. As he stepped outside to make the call, I sat alone in the quiet room with Harold's letter in my lap and the printed betrayal spread across the table like poison ivy. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to drive straight to Daniel's house and wave every page in his face. Part of me wanted to crawl into bed and pull the blanket over my head and pretend none of this was real. Instead, I did what old women like me sometimes do when life knocks us flat. I straightened my shoulders, fixed my collar, and decided that if people wanted to treat me like I was already buried, I would make very sure I rose up first. On the taxi ride home, I said nothing. I only looked out the window as the town rolled by. The diner where Harold liked pie, the pharmacy where we bought cough drops every winter, the gas station where Daniel had once worked after school. Every corner held a memory. Every memory now felt bruised. When I got home, I did not go inside right away. I stood on the porch with my purse clutched to my chest and looked at the front door of the house. Harold built shelves in, painted walls in, laughed in, prayed in. No one was taking this house from me. No one was using my husband's death as a ladder to climb over my body. Inside, the rooms were too quiet. I made tea with shaking hands, though I barely drank it. Then I sat at the kitchen table and spread out just 3 pages from the envelope. Enough to make the truth impossible to ignore, but not enough to drown in it yet. 1 page showed a draft agreement tied to my house. 1 page showed a copied version of my signature. 1 page showed that awful email from Vanessa. I stared at them until sunset turned the kitchen gold. Then Just as I reached for the phone to call Laura Bennett, I heard a key slide into my front door. I froze it. Daniel never knocked. Harold had always hated that. Use the doorbell, son. A man should not enter someone else's house like a thief. The lock. Ternity. Vanessa's voice floated in before I saw her. Sweet and bright and wrong. Margaret, we thought you might be lonely. Then Daniel stepped in behind her, carrying flowers. And the first thing Vanessa's eyes landed on was the stack of papers on my kitchen table. Her smile vanished. And that was when I knew without a single doubt that the real war in my family had just begun. Vanessa's smile vanished so fast. It felt like a curtain dropping on a stage. For one small second, none of us moved. Daniel stood behind her holding a bouquet of white lilies wrapped in clear paper. The kind people bring when someone dies, and they want to look thoughtful without really knowing what to say. He looked tired, older than his 42 years, with the same brown eyes Harold had. Except Harold's eyes had always looked steady. Daniel's looked slippery now, like they were searching the room for the safest place to land. Vanessa recovered first. She always did, she said lightly, glancing at the papers on the table, then back at me. You're busy. I folded my hands in my lap so she would not see how badly I wanted to snatch those pages away. I was. Daniel cleared his throat. Mom, we brought flowers. Yes, I said. I can see that. The lilies looked too white, too clean, too fake. Harold would have hated them. He used to say lilies smelled like funerals and waiting rooms. Vanessa stepped farther into the kitchen, as if she owned the room. We just got worried. You haven't been answering much. And after everything we thought, maybe you shouldn't be alone tonight. There it was again, hidden under the sugar, that soft little push. You shouldn't be alone. You need help. You might not be able to manage. It sounded caring if you did not know how to listen. His fingers tightened around the flower stems. What do you mean? I mean, I said, keeping my voice calm, I spent part of today at the bank. Vanessa did not even blink at first, but I saw the muscles in her neck tighten. Daniel's whole face changed. Not much, but enough. Enough for a wife of 46 years and a mother of 42 to see it. The bank, he repeated. Yes. I tilted my head. The safety deposit box. The silence that followed was so stiff, it felt like dry paper. Vanessa let out a tiny laugh, too quick, too polished. Oh, Margaret, that old thing. Harold probably just left boring forms in there. Did Heath? She smiled again, but her eyes stayed sharp, probably. I picked up the top page from the table. Not the worst page. Just one of the property drafts and watched their faces carefully. Funny, I said, because I found something more interesting than forms. Daniel took one step forward. Mom, maybe we should sit down. No. I said that one word landed harder than I expected. Daniel stopped. I had spent too many years making things soft for him. Soft landings, soft excuses, soft consequences. A mother can ruin a grown son that way without ever meaning to. Harold used to tell me Maggie stopped patting the walls. One day he'll run straight into the truth and blame everyone else for the bruise. I used to think Harold was being too hard. Now, I was not so sure. Vanessa set her purse on the counter. Margaret, you look upset. Maybe you misunderstood something. I almost smiled at that. She did not even know what I had found, but she was already preparing my confusion for me. I understood enough, I said. Daniel looked trapped, like a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar, and no idea whether to lie or cry. Mom, whatever you saw, I can explain. Oh, good, I said, because I would love an explanation. His mouth opened, then closed again. Vanessa stepped in, before he could fail. What Daniel means is that there may have been paperwork in motion before Harold passed. We were only trying to help. Your husband was under stress. You were grieving even before he died. We thought it would be wise to prepare some things. I looked straight at her by trying to enter the box before me. That hit. Daniel's head jerked up. Vanessa's perfect posture stiffened, so they had not expected the bank to tell me. Vanessa drew in a breath. You went through security records. No, I said. The bank manager showed me after I asked who tried to get in. Daniel turned to her. You said they wouldn't tell her that. She snapped her head toward him so fast, it almost made me flinch. But then she caught herself and laughed again. Softer this time. Daniel, please. This is exactly why we didn't want to upset your mother. Everything is getting twisted. Your mother, not mom now. Your mother. A small change, but full of distance. I rose from my chair slowly. My knees ached, but I stood tall anyway. Then, let's untwist it. Tell me why you went to that bank. Tell me why you brought legal papers. Tell me why my signature appears on documents I never signed. And then, Vanessa, tell me why you wrote that once Harold was gone, I would be too confused to fight you. Daniel made a broken sound in his throat. Vanessa did not. She went still, dangerously still, like ice on a pond. For a moment, I thought she might deny it. Instead, she said, You read my email. It was printed in my husband's box. Daniel dropped the flowers. They hit the floor with a soft crackle of paper and a wet little thud. Lily bent sideways, its white petals bruising against the tile. He looked at Vanessa as if seeing her for the first time and not liking what he saw. You told me Dad was paranoid. You turned to him, voice low and urgent. Daniel, not now. No, I said now is exactly the time. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Part of me was terrified. Part of me felt strangely calm, the kind of calm that comes when fear finally burns long enough to become anger. Daniel dragged both hands over his face. Mom, I didn't know about all of it. There it was. Not innocence. Not even honesty yet. Just the beginning of it. How much did you know? I asked. He looked at the floor. We were behind on money. Vanessa jumped in. Everybody is behind on money. I ignored her. How far behind? Daniel swallowed. More than I told you. More than I told Dad. That did not surprise me. Daniel had always hidden bad news until it got big enough to kick down the door. When did this start? I asked. A year ago, he said. Vanessa sighed dramatically as if this were all an inconvenience to her. Daniel's consulting work slowed down. The credit cards got high, and the second mortgage on our house became difficult. We had options to protect the family, but Harold refused to listen. Protect the family, I repeated. Yes, she said, and now the paid house, the garage property, savings, a safety deposit box full of who knows what. Meanwhile, your son was drowning. Good parents help. Good parents help. That sentence would have made me cry once. Now, it made my skin crawl. Harold had helped Daniel more times than I could count. Small loans, business advice, paid bills just this once, covered school fees for the twins. When Daniel and Vanessa overspent one Christmas, help in our family had become an open door that was never allowed to close. But this was not help. This was hunger, wearing family's face. I looked at Daniel again. Did you plan to take my house? No. He said it too quickly, too desperately. Then his eyes darted to Vanessa. I saw the truth right there, not in his word, but in the fear behind it. Vanessa folded her arms. No one was taking your house. We were restructuring things. By forging my signature, they were draft documents. By telling the bank, I was sick and confused. We were trying to avoid delays. I stared at her. Your husband's father was barely buried. She gave a cold little shrug. Life does not pause because people are sentimental. I felt the room tilt for just a second, not from weakness, but from shock. Some people say cruel things when angry. Vanessa said cruel things, the way some people read the weather calmly like facts. Daniel looked horrified now, Vanessa, but she was beyond caring. She had lost the mask, and once people like that lose it, they do not rush to pick it up. She pointed at the papers on the table. Let's stop pretending, Margaret. Harold never trusted us. He hoarded everything. He acted like you too, with the only people who mattered. He kept Daniel tied to guilt for years. And yes, we went to the bank because we knew he'd hidden something that could either save us or destroy us. Her voice sharpened on the last words. That caught my attention. Destroy you? I asked. She realized too late that she had said too much. Daniel looked at her. What does that mean? Nothing, she said. It didn't sound like nothing. She turned to him, and now the fight between them was leaking into the room, whether they wanted it to or not. It means your father kept records on everyone. It means he watched us. It means he didn't just mistrust me, Daniel. He was building a case. A case? That word sat heavy in the air. Against them. Or maybe against her? My mind went back to Harold's letter. Money taken. Signatures copied. Plans discussed behind our backs. And then that one line, I believe Daniel does not fully understand what Vanessa has done in his name. A cold thought moved through me. Harold had not only been protecting me, he had been protecting Daniel too. From his own wife. I did not say it yet. I only watched. Daniel took a shaky step back from Vanessa. What case? She looked at him with open irritation now, like his confusion bored her. Stop acting surprised. Your father tracked the transfers. The garage account, the temporary line of credit, the business loan. Daniel stared at her. You told me the business loan was legal. It was meant to be temporary. My voice came out flat. What business loan? Neither of them answered right away. So, I asked louder. What business loan? Daniel's face crumpled. Mom, Vanessa spoke instead. Because of course she did. We used the garage property as leverage. I felt something inside me go cold and hard. Harold's repair shop. The little brick building on Edgewater Road with the faded blue sign. And the bell over the office door. You had no right, I whispered. It was supposed to be covered before anyone noticed. Anyone, I said. Do you mean Harold or me? Daniel finally looked straight at me, and I saw tears standing in his eyes. Real tears, weak tears, late tears. Dad found out 3 months ago. I closed my eyes for 1 second. 3 months. Harold had known for 3 months and said nothing to me. He had carried it alone, set his trap quietly, gathered his proof, and waited. Maybe because he hoped Daniel would confess. Maybe because he did not want to break my heart before he had to. When I opened my eyes again, Vanessa was reaching for the papers on the table. I moved faster than she expected. I snatched them first and stepped back. Do not touch those. Her voice turned sharp as glass. Those papers are about family matters. Yes, I said mine. Daniel looked wildly between us. Mom, please just let me explain the loan. It started small. I thought I could fix it. Vanessa said we could move some things around, then pay it back after the sale of her cousin's property. But that sale fell through, and then interest piled up, and Dad found an email and he stopped her. And what? I asked. He looked sick, and then he said he was changing his will. That made the room go dead quiet. Vanessa's chin lifted. She knew I had just learned something new. Changing it how? I asked. Daniel did not answer. Vanessa did. He said if anything happened to him, you would control everything, every property, every account he could protect. He said Daniel would get nothing directly until he proved he could act like a man instead of a child. My throat tightened. That sounded exactly like Harold. Crawl to some people, maybe. But to me, it sounded like the last desperate act of a father who had run out of softer ways to save his son. Daniel whispered. He called me weak. Were you? I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time in a very long time, he did not hide. Yes, that word hurt because it was true, and because it came too late. Vanessa scoffed. This is ridiculous. We are not standing in a kitchen pretending Harold was some saint. He controlled all of you, even from the grave. No, I said quietly. From the grave, he told the truth. She laughed, once bitter and short. You think you know the truth because you found a folder. You have no idea how much trouble Daniel is in. That mattered, not because I pitied her, but because truth often slips out when people are scared. What kind of trouble? I asked. Again, she had said too much. Daniel turned pale, Vanessa. She clenched her jaw. I took one slow breath. Trouble with who? No answer. Then, from outside, headlights swept across my front window. A car door slammed. Another one. After it. Daniel turned toward the sound like he had been struck. Vanessa's face drained of color for the first time since she walked in. My chest tightened. Who is that? Neither of them moved. Then someone pounded on my front door so hard, the frame rattled. Not a polite knock, not a neighbor's tap. A pounding full of impatience and threat. Daniel whispered, "Oh no." Vanessa spun toward him, fury and panic colliding on her face. You said they wouldn't come here. They. I felt every tiny hair on my arms rise. The pounding came again, louder this time, and a man's voice boomed through the wood. Daniel Mercer opened this door. We know you're inside. I looked from my son to my daughter-in-law and understood in one terrifying flash that whatever mess they had dragged behind them was now standing on my porch. And it had finally found my house. The pounding on my front door shook the whole hallway. For 1 second, none of us breathed. Daniel looked like a man whose worst nightmare had just spoken his name out loud. Vanessa, who had walked into my kitchen like she owned the earth, now looked like the earth had opened under her feet. I stood between them and the table, Harold's papers clutched tight in my hand, my heart hitting my ribs so hard it hurt. The pounding came again. Daniel Mercer, the man shouted from outside. You can hide from calls. You can hide from letters, but you can't hide from this. I turned to my son. Who is that? Daniel's lips moved, but no sound came out. Vanessa answered first, because she always did when he was weak. Don't open the door. I looked at her. That is not an answer. Another hard slam rattled the knob. Daniel the man barked, open up now. My voice came out sharper than I planned. Who is that? Daniel finally spoke very quietly. A debt collector. I stared at him, Not because I did not understand the words, but because I did too well. A debt collector, I repeated. Vanessa jumped in. Not exactly. The door shook again. Then, exactly what? I snapped. Daniel dragged both hands over his face. Mom, please, just stay calm. Stay calm, I said. A stranger is pounding on my front door at night, shouting your name, and you want me to stay calm. He looked ashamed. Good. Shame was late, but it was something. Vanessa took one fast step toward the hallway and lowered her voice. We don't have time for this. Tell him to leave. I laughed, then a short angry sound that surprised even me. Tell him to leave. This is my house. I'm not hiding in it for your sake. She turned on me. You don't understand how serious this is. Then explain it. She opened her mouth, shut it, then looked at Daniel again with open blame. This is what happens when you panic. I panicked. He shot back. You're the one who said we could fix it. Their whispers had teeth now. Whatever image of a united team they once had was cracking wide open right in my kitchen. The pounding came again, followed by a second voice colder than the first. Mr. Mercer, we have legal paperwork and a recovery order. Open the door. Recovery order. I had heard enough hard words in my life to know when trouble had moved past simple shouting. I stepped toward the hallway. Vanessa grabbed my wrist. Don't. The nerve of that woman. I looked down at her hand until she let go. You do not grab me in my own home, I said. Then I walked straight to the front door. Behind me, Daniel whispered, Mom, wait. I did not. I kept the chain on and opened the door only a few inches. Cold evening air slipped inside. Two men stood on my porch in dark coats. Was broad and red-faced with a folder tucked under his arm. The other was tall and thin, carrying a leather briefcase, and the kind of stillness that makes you trust him less, not more. Yes, I said. The red-faced man leaned forward and tried to see past me. We are looking for Daniel Mercer. You found Margaret Hayes, I said. And you are. He held up a badge too quickly for me to study. My name is Roy Benson. This is Mr. Pike. We are here regarding an outstanding business obligation. Business obligation. That sounded cleaner than the pounding on my door. My son does not live here, I said. Mr. Pike spoke then. His voice was smooth and careful. Mrs. Hayes, we have reason to believe he is inside. I looked straight at him. And if he is, he gave a tiny smile that never reached his eyes. Then we'd appreciate a word. Behind me, I could feel Daniel and Vanessa standing in silence, cowards, both of them, hiding behind an old woman and her dead husband's house. I kept my hand on the door. A word about what? Mr. Benson opened the folder. A secured loan, default, misrepresentation of collateral, missed deadlines, broken promises, that sort of thing. My stomach sank. Collateral. Garage. Property. Harold had been right. I did not let my face show it. You can mail your concerns, I said. Mr. Pike's eyes sharpened. We did repeatedly. Then he lowered his voice a little. Mrs. Hayes, it would be better for everyone if this stays quiet. That sentence turned the air colder. Quiet. That word had ruined more families than shouting ever did. Quiet is where lies grow. Quiet is where weak people hide. Quiet is where decent people talk themselves into waiting one more day. Harold had written, "Do not let silence bury you beside me." I lifted my chin. Nothing about tonight feels quiet. Mr. Benson gave a small, impatient sigh. Ma'am, With respect, if your son is in there, he needs to face this. The amount owed has grown. Our clients have been more than patient. Clients? Not bank, not court officer. Clients. I filed that away. And who are your clients? I asked. Mr. Pike smiled again, thin as thread. People who expect their money back. That was not an answer either. Before I could reply, Daniel called from behind me. Ma'am, close the door. His voice had that same frightened crack I remembered from when he was 8 and knocked over a shelf in Harold's garage. Back then, he was scared of broken jars and his father's disappointment. Now he was scared of men on a porch and whatever he had signed away. Mr. Benson heard him. His whole face lit up with ugly satisfaction. There he is. He shoved a shoe against the bottom of the door before I could close it. My blood ran hot at once. Remove your foot, I said. Mr. Pike lifted one hand. No need for that, Roy. But Roy Benson did not move. From behind me, Daniel said, Please, just tell them I'm not here. I turned my head slowly and looked at him. Tell them I'm not here. A grown man, my son, standing in his dead father's hallway, asking his mother to lie for him. Something inside me hardened. I faced the porch again. Take your foot away from my door. Mr. Benson did not. So I raised my voice clear and strong, the way I had not used it in years. Remove your foot now, or I will call the police and tell them 2 men are trying to force their way into my home. That worked it. He pulled back with a muttered curse. Mr. Pike gave him a warning glance, then looked back at me. Mrs. Hayes, no one wants a scene. You should have thought of that before pounding on my door like thugs, I said. For the first time, his smile disappeared. He reached into the briefcase and removed a folded paper. Then perhaps you'll accept this. It's formal notice. Mr. Mercer has 48 hours to respond before further action begins. I did not take it immediately. What kind of further action? He held my gaze. Asset recovery. I finally took the paper. The name at the top meant nothing to me, but the amount halfway down made my knees go weak. It was far bigger than I expected. Far bigger than a few missed credit cards. Far bigger than a second mortgage. Daniel owed more than $200,000. My fingers tightened on the page. Mr. Pike saw that I had read it. We would strongly advise cooperation. Then he gave a short nod, turned, and walked down the porch steps. Benson followed after one last glare toward the crack in the door. I shut it fast and locked it. Then the house went silent. Not peaceful. Silent. The awful kind. The kind where every small sound grows too loud. The clock on the wall. The hum of the refrigerator. The shaky breathing of people who know pretending is over. I turned around. Daniel looked at the floor. Vanessa crossed her arms, as if she still had the right to be defensive. I held up the notice. $200,000. No one answered. $200,000. I repeated, louder. Daniel flinched. It wasn't supposed to get that high. I nearly laughed, from pure disbelief. Things that are not supposed to happen do not just fall from the sky, Daniel. They happen because people keep doing foolish things while lying about them. Vanessa's eyes flashed. That is not fair. I stared at her. Fair. You forged papers in my name. They were drafts. You tried to get into my husband's box behind my back. We were desperate. You risked the garage. We meant to fix it. Every answer from her was a shove away from guilt and toward excuses. I was tired of excuses. Daniel sank into one of the kitchen chairs and covered his face. Mom, I didn't know it had gotten that bad. Vanessa snapped toward him. Because you never wanted to know. You only wanted me to handle it. Handle it. What? A poisonous little phrase. Not solve it. Not face it. Handle it. I looked at Daniel. Start at the beginning. All of it. No lies. No protecting her. No protecting yourself. Right now. For once, Vanessa did not interrupt him. Maybe she was too angry. Maybe she realized she had already said too much. Maybe she was deciding which version of the truth would save her best. Daniel slowly lowered his hands. It started with my firm, he said. 2 years ago, we lost 3 big clients in 6 months. I kept thinking things would turn around. I told Vanessa it was temporary. We used savings first, then cards, then the mortgage. I said nothing. I let him keep going. Then she said we could use short-term private money just to catch up. She had a friend who knew someone. Vanessa rolled her eyes. A legitimate lender. But he ignored her. At first, it was $40,000. Then fees got added. Then interest. I missed one deadline. Then another. They offered a rollover. Vanessa said it would buy time. That made my skin prickle. Private money. Rollovers. Deadlines. Men on porches. This was not a simple bank mess. This was the kind of mess that creeps in smiling and leaves bite marks. And the garage? I asked. Daniel swallowed hard. I told them I had access to future family property. Future family property. Like Harold and I were already dead. I closed my eyes for 1 second. When your father found out, I said, what exactly did he find? Daniel looked sick again. An email chain, some property records. He saw Vanessa's notes about moving assets before telling you. I looked at her, moving assets. She lifted her chin. I was protecting my husband. No, I said quietly. You were feeding on him. That landed. For the first time, something mean and naked showed in her face. That's rich, coming from you. You and Harold never respected our marriage. You always thought Daniel belonged to you. I shook my head. Daniel belongs to his choices. Daniel made a small broken noise. Good. Sometimes truth should hurt. I sat down slowly across from him. My anger was still there. But grief had begun to move under it too, heavy and old. I looked at my son and saw all his ages at once. The baby, who held my finger. The score by with scraped knees. The college student, too proud to ask for help. The grown man, now drowning in fear and debt, because he kept choosing the easiest lie over the hardest truth. What else? I asked. He stared at the table. What else, Daniel? His voice dropped to a whisper. There's more than one lender. The room seemed to shrink. How many? He said nothing. Vanessa said 3. I turned to her. She spoke flatly now. The sweetness gone for good. 3 groups. The first was supposed to cover the second. The second was supposed to buy time with the first. The third was for the legal paperwork and a bridge payment. I almost did not understand what I was hearing because it was so stupid, so reckless, so unbelievably cruel to every person attached to it. You stacked debt on debt on debt, I said. Yes, she said, as if admitting she forgot to buy milk. Daniel whispered. I thought I could fix it before Dad knew. But he knew, I said. Daniel nodded. And then he changed his will. Another nod. And then what? He squeezed his eyes shut. And then Vanessa got angry. That made me look at her again. She did not deny it. In fact, she gave a little shrug. Of course, I got angry. Harold was going to lock us out and leave Daniel with nothing. Nothing, I said. You mean nothing easy. She leaned forward. Do you know what it's like to build a life and realize your in-laws would rather watch you drown than help? I leaned forward too. Do you know what it's like to bury your husband and find out your son and his wife were waiting in line to strip your life before the flowers on his grave went dry? She looked away first. That mattered. The kitchen fell quiet again. After a long moment, I stood and went to the counter to pour water into a glass. My hands were shaking, but I kept them steady enough. I brought the glass back and set it in front of Daniel. He looked up at me in surprise. Drink, I said. He did, because no matter what he had done, he was still my son, and mothers are cursed that way. We can despise what our children become, and still notice when their lips are dry. Vanessa noticed it too. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Of course you still baby him. I rounded on her so fast, the chair legs scraped the floor. Do not mistake mercy for blindness. She stood too. And do not mistake anger for power. You have papers. Fine. You have old letters. Fine. But those men outside do not care about family hurt. They care about money. And if Daniel goes down, all of us go down. All of us. There it was. Again. Her favorite trick. Tie herself to everyone else, so her guilt becomes shared, whether instead of personal choice. I shook my head. No, not all of us. You chose this. Daniel followed you into it. Harold tried to stop it. And I am the one standing in the wreckage. She reached for her purse. Then maybe you should decide whether you want to stand alone. That sentence landed wrong. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Threateningly. I heard it. Daniel heard it too. He looked up sharply. What does that mean? I asked. Vanessa slipped a hand into her purse and pulled out her phone. It means you still don't know everything Harold kept from you. My chest tightened. She tapped the screen, then turned it toward me. It was a photo. At first, I did not understand what I was seeing. A man sitting in a car, dark jacket, gray hair, side profile. Then my whole body went cold. Harold, my Harold, alive in the picture. Alive and talking to a woman through a rolled-down window. A woman I knew. Laura Bennett, our old family lawyer. I snatched the phone and stared at the date in the corner. 5 days before Harold died. I looked up slowly. Why do you have this? Vanessa smiled then, small and cruel and triumphant, because your husband was not only changing his will, he was planning something much bigger. Something he never told you. My mouth went dry. What? Bigger. She took back her phone and slid it into her purse. Ask Laura. Daniel stood up so fast, his chair tipped backward. Vanessa stopped, but she was already backing toward the hallway. No, I said. You do not get to drop that and walk away. She put her hand on the doorknob. You wanted truth, Margaret. Now go get the rest of it. Then she opened the door and stepped into the night. Daniel rushed after her. Vanessa. I followed to the porch just in time to see her hurrying toward her car at the curb, heels sharp on the pavement, while Daniel ran behind her. She yanked open the driver's door. He caught her arm. What bigger plan? What are you talking about? She spun on him, furious now. Truly furious. I'm talking about the part your father never told your saintly mother. The part that proves he was ready to bury both of us. Daniel went pale. What did he do? She laughed, once wild and breathless. Find Laura. She has the rest. Then she ripped her arm free, got into the car, and slammed the door. Daniel banged once on the window, Vanessa. She reversed so fast. The tires squealed, then shot down the street and disappeared into the dark. Daniel stood in the road staring after her. I stayed on the porch, one hand pressed to the post to steady myself. Harold's papers tucked under my arm, my mind spinning around that photo and her words. Ask Laura. Find Laura. She has the rest. Then Daniel turned back toward me, face white as paper, and said the one thing I was not ready to hear. Mom. If Dad told Laura everything, then he may have known why his brakes failed. And just like that, my husband's death was no longer the only tragedy in my family. It might also be the center of the crime. My knees nearly gave out on the porch. For a moment, I truly thought I had heard my son wrong. The night air felt too thin, like there was not enough of it left for the words hanging between us. Daniel, I said very slowly, what did you just say? He looked wrecked. His face had gone gray, and his hands were shaking so badly he had to curl them into fists. He climbed the porch steps, like a man walking toward a judge, not his mother. I said, he whispered. Dad may have known why his brakes failed. The world seemed to narrow to that one sentence. Harold's face flashed in my mind. His tired smile in the hospital, the bruises from the crash, the machines, the doctor saying the word accident in that careful voice people use when they think soft words can make hard truth gentler. Accident. That word had carried us through the funeral. That word had sat beside me at night. That word had helped me survive. Now it felt cracked down the middle. I stepped back into the house because I suddenly could not stand outside another second. Daniel followed and shut the door. The kitchen looked the same as before. Same table, same teacup, same papers, but nothing in it felt ordinary anymore. I turned toward him. Explain everything right now. He swallowed hard and nodded. I didn't want to tell you before because I wasn't sure. Then after Dad died, Vanessa told me to keep my mouth shut. She said grief makes people imagine things. She said if I mentioned it, you'd fall apart. His voice broke on the last words. I almost laughed from pain. Fall apart, I said. I buried my husband. I watched my family rot around me and still got up every morning. Do not tell me what I can survive. He lowered his eyes. I know. No, I said. You are just learning. He sank into the chair again, and this time, I stayed standing. I needed that. I needed height. I needed my feet under me. It started a week before the crash, he said. Dad called me to the garage after hours. He sounded strange, not angry exactly, but finished, like he had finally hit a wall. That sounded like Harold, too. What happened? I asked. He had printed records on the desk, loan records, property searches, copies of emails. He knew about the lenders, and he knew Vanessa had been pushing to move things into a trust or temporary management structure after he died. The rage that went through me then was so hot, it felt clean. After he died, she had planned around his death, while he was still alive. I held onto the back of the chair to keep my voice steady. And what did your father say? Daniel stared at the table. He said I was acting like a coward. He said debt can be repaired, but character gets harder to fix every year you lie. That was Harold, all over, tough plain, and cutting right to the bone. He told me he was changing the will, Daniel went on. He said you would control everything, and he was going to put the house and the garage where Vanessa couldn't touch them. He said if I wanted a future, I'd have to earn it the honest way. My throat tightened. Harold had been protecting me, and maybe, in his own rough way, protecting Daniel too. Then what I asked. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Then Vanessa found out. We had met. I don't know how. She always seemed to know things. Maybe from my phone, maybe from emails. Maybe because she watched me so closely. I stopped knowing what I had said out loud. That part, I believed immediately. People like Vanessa do not always need locked doors or secret passwords. They train themselves on weakness. They learn where to press, when to smile, when to frighten, when to cry. She got furious, he said. Not loud at first, quiet. That was worse. She kept saying your father was trying to destroy us. She said if he locked everything down, the lenders would come harder. She said our only chance was to get ahead of him. Get ahead of him, I repeated. Daniel nodded miserably. She wanted me to go back to Dad and change his mind. Ask for one more loan. Get him to sign something temporary. I said no. I swear I said no. I believed he had said no. I also believed no did not last long enough with him. What happened? Tiny nerve in my body listened. He said he had dropped a packet with Laura Bennett. He said if anything happened to him, she'd know what to do. I thought he was just being dramatic. Dad always got intense when he thought family was slipping. Family was slipping. That was such a small phrase for such a big ruin. He also said something else. Daniel said, "What?" He said he had checked the truck and found the brake line looked wrong. I stopped breathing for a second. Wronged. Not broken by chance. Wronged. He thought it had been tampered with. Daniel nodded slowly. He didn't say it like an accusation. He said it like a puzzle, like he wasn't ready to believe it yet. He asked if I had driven the truck recently. I told him no. Then he asked if Vanessa had access to the garage keys when she dropped off lunch 2 days earlier. My hands went cold. Had access. Keys. Garage. I sat down at last because suddenly I needed the chair. What did you tell him? That she had borrowed my key ring earlier that week. His voice got smaller. She said she needed my car key because hers was in my jacket pocket. I didn't think anything of it then. Of course, he had not. Harold had seen patterns. Daniel saw moments. That was part of the problem. Life punishes people who never step back far enough to see the whole picture. I pressed one hand to my chest. Did Harold say he thought Vanessa did it? No, Daniel said quickly. He said he was going to have the truck checked again before driving it far. He told me not to mention the call to anyone until he understood what he was looking at. I stared at him, but he drove it anyway. Daniel looked like he might cry. Yes, Harold had driven into town that afternoon. The crash happened on the Old County Road near Miller's Bridge. The police said he lost control. The mechanic report mentioned brake failure consistent with line damage. At the time, it sounded like bad luck. Old vehicle, worn parts, sad timing. Now, it sounded like a door opening into darkness. Why didn't you tell me this after he died? I asked. Daniel's eyes filled because I was scared because I didn't know if it meant anything, because Vanessa said I'd destroy what was left of you if I started accusing people with no proof. I leaned back and shut my eyes for a moment. There it was. Again. Silence. The family disease. The thing Harold had warned against. When I opened my eyes, Daniel was staring at me like a little boy, waiting to see whether punishment or mercy would come first. He deserved both. Instead, I asked the question that had been building in me since the porch. Do you think Vanessa had something to do with your father's breaks? He looked shattered. I don't know, he whispered. I didn't want to think that. I still don't. But after tonight, after that photo, after what she said, I keep hearing Dad's voice in my head. What voice? Daniel looked at me, and tears slipped down his face. He said, son, the danger isn't just debt. It's what frightened people decide they are willing to do. That sounded exactly like Harold, too. I got up and began packing the kitchen because I could not sit with that sentence. Harold had suspected something before he died. He had left proof in the bank. He had trusted Laura. And Vanessa had just waved a photo in my face like a knife, daring me to learn more, which meant one of two things. Either she was bluffing, or she believed the truth would hurt me enough to keep me off balance. Both possibilities made me angrier. I stopped packing. We are calling Laura. Daniel blinked now. Yes, now. It's late. So is the truth. I found Laura Bennett's number in an old address book Harold kept by the phone. My fingers shook only once before I steadied them. I pressed call and held the phone to my ear. It rang 4 times. Then Laura answered, sounding sleepy and wary. Hello, Laura. It's Margaret Hayes. Silence. Then all the sleep left her voice at once. Margaret, are you alone? That question hit me hard. No. I said Daniel is here. Another pause, heavier this time. I see. That was not the answer of a woman hearing from an old friend. That was the answer of someone whose worst expectation had just walked into the room. I glanced at Daniel, then turned slightly away. Laura, I went to the bank today. I opened Harold's box. Her breath caught, and she asked quietly. And I found the letters, the papers, the drive. I found enough to know Harold thought Daniel and Vanessa were trying to take the house and the garage. I found enough to know he trusted you. And 5 minutes ago, Vanessa showed me a picture of you talking to Harold 5 days before he died and told me to ask you what bigger plan my husband was hiding. For a long moment, Laura said nothing. Then she asked, did she say anything else? Yes, I said. She said Harold was ready to bury both of them. On the other end, Laura let out a slow breath that sounded almost like grief. Margaret, she said, you need to come see me first thing in the morning. No, I said. I need the truth tonight. Not over the phone. Tonight, Laura. I heard papers shifting on her end. A drawer. A door closing. Then her voice dropped lower. Harold did more than change his will. I closed my eyes briefly. I knew it, I whispered. He created a conditional trust, she said. It was designed to protect the house, the garage property, and most of the liquid savings from forced transfer, predatory lending, or spousal pressure. It was legal, carefully drafted, and it gave you full control. My hand tightened on the phone. That made sense. It fit Harold's letter. It fit his fear. But it did not explain Vanessa's smug face on the porch. Then why did she say there was more? I asked. Laura hesitated. That hesitation told me everything before she even spoke. Because Harold also filed a sealed statement. My skin prickled. A sealed statement. About what? About suspected fraud, Laura said, and about his fear that his death might not be accidental if pressure around the debt worsened. I turned and looked at Daniel. He looked like all the blood had drained out of him. What kind of statement? I asked. It named documents, dates, financial transfers, copied signatures, private lender contacts, and concerns about the vehicle brake line, Laura said. He asked that if anything happened to him unexpectedly, the packet be released to law enforcement and probate counsel. I could not speak for a second. Harold had not only prepared for betrayal, he had prepared for death. When did you file it? I finally asked. 4 days before the crash. I sat down hard. Daniel made a choking sound across the room. Laura kept talking, careful and clear now, as if she knew there was no gentle way through this anymore. He did not accuse anyone directly. He was very precise about that. He said he had suspicions, not proof, but he wanted a record that he had concerns. He also wanted a trail that could not disappear if people rushed in after his death. That was why the bank box existed, why the red writing was on the envelope, why my name was on the first letter. Harold had built layers one after another, like a man boarding up windows before a storm. And I had known none of it. Why didn't you tell me after he died? I asked. Laura's voice softened, because I was waiting for the medical report, the vehicle report, and probate timing, and because Harold was very specific. He said, "If I die naturally or by clear accident, don't drown Maggie in fear before the facts settle. But if anyone starts moving too fast around her, tell her everything." Tears burned my eyes. Even in fear, even in planning, he had been thinking of me. I swallowed hard. People are moving very fast, Laura. I know, she said quietly. I had a call from a man claiming to represent Daniel 2 days after the funeral. He wanted to know whether any trust changes had been made. I told him nothing. That made my stomach turn again. 2 days after the funeral, Harold had not even been in the ground, a full week before they were circling. Daniel whispered from across the room, "Mom." I held up a hand so he would stay silent. "Laura," I said, "do the police know about the sealed statement?" "Yes. It was delivered after the attempted access at the bank was reported to me this afternoon." I went still. "You already sent it?" "Yes," she said. "The moment I heard someone try to get into the box without you, I released it. Harold's condition had been met." A strange feeling moved through me then. Not relief. Exactly. Not peace. But something like Harold reaching across the dark and setting one more piece in place. "What happens now?" I asked. "An investigator may contact you," Laura said. "The trust will also become active immediately. If I file the final probate notice tomorrow morning, that means no one can sell, borrow against, or transfer the protected property without your direct authority." That mattered. A lot. Vanessa had lost the race and did not know it yet. I almost smiled. Not because anything was funny, but because, for the first time since the bank, I could see the shape of my revenge clearly. Not screaming, not begging, not chaos. Truth, law, and patience. The kind of revenge Harold would respect. "Laura," I said, "I'm coming to see you in the morning." "Good," she said. "Bring everything from the box and Margaret." "Yes." "Do not let Daniel leave with any documents, and do not let Vanessa back into that house tonight." I looked at my son, who flinched, even though I had not spoken his name. "I understand," I said. After I hung up, the kitchen was very quiet again. Daniel stared at me with red eyes. Dad filed something with the police. Yes. He covered his mouth with one hand. "Did you know?" I asked. "No." His answer came fast and broken. I swear, Mom, I didn't know. I believed him. Not because he had earned easy trust, but because shock still has a look. And this was it, he whispered. He really thought he might be killed. I answered carefully. He thought frightened and greedy people can become dangerous. Daniel looked wrecked by that. Good. Again. Some truth should stay sharp. I gathered the papers from the table and slid them back into the envelope one by one. Property drafts, email copies, notes, records. Every sheet suddenly felt heavier. Daniel watched me. What are you going to do? I met his eyes. I am going to protect what your father left. I am going to meet Laura. I am going to tell the truth when I am asked, and I am going to stop covering for people who put this family in danger. His face crumpled. Mom, I know I failed. Yes, I said, you did. He nodded, crying openly now. I don't know how to fix it. You start by not lying again. He whispered, okay. For a little while, neither of us said anything. I made coffee, even though it was late, because I knew sleep was not coming. Daniel sat at the table, hollowed wide and quiet, while I moved around the kitchen doing small things with careful hands, putting the cups out, rinsing the kettle, straightening a towel that did not need straightening. Sometimes grief and fear are too big to touch directly, so you touch smaller things instead. At last, I gave him a cup. He looked at it like he did not deserve it. Maybe he didn't, but I handed it to him anyway. He took a sip and stared into the dark liquid. Dad loved this kitchen. Yes, I said. A painful little smile touched his face. He used to stand right there by the stove and burn toast every Sunday. That made me laugh, despite myself. Harold did burn toast every Sunday. Always talking, always distracted, always insisting he had it under control while smoke curled toward the ceiling. For one soft second, the room held him again. Then, the moment passed. Daniel set the cup down. Mom. Yes. If Vanessa did something to the truck, if she really did. He could not finish. I did it for him. Then the truth will find her. He looked at me, and I think that was the moment he realized I was not going to crumble for him anymore. Good. Let him see it. Let all of them see it. The hours stretched. Midnight slipped past. Around 1 a.m, Daniel dozed in the chair for a while, his head bowed like a punished child. I stayed awake in the living room with Harold's wedding band in my palm, and the flash drive on the table in front of me, staring at both like they were two small doors I had not yet opened. I thought about the lesson hiding inside all this pain. Silence helps the liar. Delay helps the bully. And love without boundaries becomes a weapon in the wrong hands. I wish I had learned that younger. Around 2 headlights washed over the front curtains. I stood at once. Daniel jerked awake. A car engine cut off outside. He looked at me, frightened. She's back. Maybe. Maybe not. I moved to the window and pulled the curtain aside, just enough to see. A dark sedan sat at the curb. Not Vanessa's car. My pulse quickened. A tall figure stepped out, holding something under one arm. Maybe a file, maybe a folder. Then the porch light caught his face. He was not one of the men from earlier. He was not a neighbor. He was a stranger in a dark coat, serious-eyed, moving with the calm confidence of someone who did not need to pound on doors to get answers. He climbed the steps and rang the bell once. Just once. Then he waited. Daniel stood up behind me, whispering, "Who is that?" I did not know. But when I opened the door, the stranger held up an ID and said, "Mrs. Hayes, I'm Detective Keller. I need to ask you some questions about your husband's death. and about the packet he left behind. And right behind him, at the edge of the curb under the weak streetlight, I saw a second car sliding silently to a stop. Vanessa's car. My heart gave one hard thump when I saw Vanessa's car stop behind the detective. For a second, all I could think was, she came back. Not to comfort anyone, not to tell the truth, not to fix what she had broken. She came back because something had shifted, and people like Vanessa always come running when they feel control slipping through their fingers. Detective Keller stood on my porch with a calm face and steady eyes. He looked to be in his early 50s, with neatly combed brown hair and a coat buttoned all the way up against the night air. He did not look dramatic. He looked careful. That comforted me more than I expected. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "I'm sorry to come so late." "You're here because of my husband," I said. "Yes, sir." Daniel had come up behind me now. The detective noticed him at once. "Daniel Mercer?" he asked. Daniel nodded weakly. "I may need to speak with you too." Daniel swallowed hard. "Okay." Behind the detective, Vanessa stepped out of her car and slammed the door. Even from the porch, I could feel the anger rolling off her. She marched toward us fast and stiff, her heels striking the sidewalk like she wanted the ground itself to obey her. "Margaret," she called sharply, "do not say one word to anybody until I'm inside." Detective Keller turned his head slowly and looked at her with open dislike. "And you are?" he asked. Vanessa stopped 2 steps short of the porch and pasted on a fake smile. "Vanessa Mercer." "I'm family." "Noted," he said. "You can wait there for a moment." No one had spoken to her that way. In a long time, I could tell her smile cracked. "This concerns me," she said. "It may," the detective replied, "which is exactly why you can wait." I almost admired him right then. I stepped back and opened the door wider. "Detective, please come in." He nodded and entered. Daniel moved aside at once. Vanessa tried to follow, but Detective Keller turned just enough to block her path. "Ma'am?" he said calmly. I said, "Wait." Her face went tight with fury. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I'm his wife, and this," he said, "is Mrs. Hayes's house." That shut her up for a moment. I led the detective into the kitchen, where the papers were stacked in neat order again, and the coffee had gone cold in our cups. He took in the room quickly, every detail, then rested a folder on the table. "I received a packet tonight from attorney Laura Bennett," he said. "She said you recently opened a safety deposit box belonging to your late husband." "I did." "And you found documents that suggest possible fraud, pressure tied to family property, and prior concerns your husband had about the condition of his truck before the crash." "Yes." He gave a small nod. "I'd like you to tell me in your own words what happened today from the beginning." So I did. I told him about the bank, about Mr. Collins and the security monitor, about seeing Daniel and Vanessa at the bank before me, about Harold's letter, about the papers, the forged signature, the property drafts, the cruel email. I told him about the men on my porch and the notice showing the debt. I told him about Vanessa's photo of Harold with Laura. I told him what Laura had explained over the phone about the trust and the sealed statement. I told him about Daniel's confession that Harold had found the brake line wrong before the crash. The detective did not interrupt much. He only asked clear questions when he needed dates or names. When I finished, the room went quiet. Then he looked at Daniel. "Is there anything in that account you'd like to correct?" Daniel looked like he might disappear into the floor. "No," he whispered. "It's true." Detective Keller watched him for a long moment. "Then I need your account too." Daniel nodded and sat down. What came out of my son then was not brave, but it was honest. He told the detective about the failing business, the debts, the private lenders, the terrible idea of using future family property as leverage. He admitted that Vanessa pushed harder than he did, but he did not pretend that made him innocent. He told him Harold confronted him, that Harold said he was changing the will, and that Harold mentioned concern about the brake line the morning of the crash. He told him Vanessa had borrowed his keyring earlier that week and had access to the garage when she dropped off lunch. He told him he had stayed silent because he was afraid, ashamed, and too weak to face what it might mean. The detective wrote steadily. When Daniel finally stopped, the room felt heavier than before, but also cleaner, like a dirty window had been wiped at last. Then the detective asked the question both of us were waiting for. Do you believe your wife may have tampered with Harold Hayes' truck? Daniel closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were full of tears. I don't know for sure, he said, but I think she was desperate enough to scare him. I think she was angry enough to do something reckless, and I think I was blind for too long. That was the truth of it. Not proof, not certainty, but truth. Detective Keller nodded slowly. Thank you. He closed his notebook, then looked toward the front hall where Vanessa was still outside. Now, he said, I'm going to speak with your wife. Vanessa did not come into the kitchen willingly. She entered like a storm, forced through a narrow doorway, all sharp perfume, stiff shoulders, and burning eyes. This is absurd, she said, before she even sat down. I have done nothing wrong. Detective Keller did not react. Please have a seat. She sat. He folded his hands. Mrs. Mercer, when did you first become aware that Harold Hayes had changed his estate plans? Her answer came too quickly. I wasn't aware of any changes. He flipped open the folder and slid a paper toward her. It was a printed email. I recognized it at once. Vanessa looked at it and froze. He spoke in the same calm voice. This appears to be your email account, discussing expected timing after Mr. Hayes' death and concerns about access to assets. Would you like to adjust your answer? For the first time that night, I saw something close to fear in her eyes. But Vanessa was Vanessa. Fear in her never came out as softness. It came out as attack. You can't prove context from one message, she said. That family has hated me for years. Harold was manipulative. Margaret enabled him. Daniel was drowning, and no one cared. I said quietly, we cared. You wanted more than care. She ignored me. The detective asked another question. Why did you attempt to access the safety deposit box before Mrs. Hayes? We were trying to help. He slid another paper over. And why did you bring authority documents the bank considered altered? Her jaw tightened. They were drafts. Drafts usually don't get presented as if they're final. No answer. He kept going. One calm question after another, and I watched something I had never seen before happen to Vanessa. Her confidence began to crack, not because anyone shouted louder than her, but because facts were laid down one by one where she could not step around them. The bank visit, the forged signature, the emails, the property drafts, the lenders, the pressure after the funeral. Then he came to the hardest part. Mrs. Mercer, he said, did you have access to Daniel Mercer's keys the week before Harold Hayes' crash? She hesitated. Too long. Yes, she said at last, briefly. Did you enter the garage? I dropped off lunch. Did you touch Mr. Hayes' truck? No. The answer came fast, sharp, rehearsed. He watched her for a long moment. Are you sure? Yes. He opened the folder again and removed one more page because we've already requested the mechanic's supplementary notes, and there is mention of a tool mark pattern near the damaged brake line. We're also reviewing camera footage from surrounding businesses near the garage. That was new information. Maybe fully real, maybe partly strategic. I could not tell. But it hit Vanessa hard. Her eyes flicked to Daniel. That tiny movement told me more than any speech. She was checking what he had said. She was checking what he knew. The detective saw it too. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, "this is the moment to be very careful." Vanessa's breathing changed. For a few seconds, she said nothing. Then she laughed once, but it sounded weak now. "I didn't want Harold dead." No one moved. She realized too late that she had answered a question. No one had asked directly. Detective Keller leaned forward slightly. "Then tell me what you did want." Her eyes filled, but I did not mistake it for innocence. Some tears come from pain. Some come from panic when the trap closes. "I wanted him scared," she whispered. Daniel made a broken sound beside me. Vanessa turned toward him, crying now, in quick, angry bursts. "You don't understand what it was like. They were going to cut us off. Those lenders were calling every hour. They said they'd ruin us. They said they'd take everything. Harold kept treating us like children while sitting on money that could have saved us. I said it was not yours." She slapped the table with her palm. "He was never going to help." The detective did not raise his voice. "What did you do, Mrs. Mercer?" She shook her head. "What did you do?" She cried harder, then finally blurted it out. "I had a man loosen the line. Just enough to make the truck fail inspection. Just enough to scare Harold and force a delay. That was all. That was all I wanted." Daniel stared at her like she had turned into a stranger. My whole body went cold. She kept talking now, words spilling out messy and ugly, and far too late. "I never told him to make it dangerous. I told him I just needed Harold off balance. Just for a little while, just long enough to sign temporary papers or agree to bridge the debt. But the man said an older truck would probably just stall or feel soft on the pedal. He said it would look like wear. I could barely hear the rest through the roaring in my ears. Not because she had shouted, because she had said it so plainly. She had done it. She had arranged it. She had touched death like it was just another business move." Daniel pushed back from the table so hard his chair scraped across the floor. "You touched my father's truck." She looked at him desperately. "I didn't mean for him to die, but you did it. I was trying to save us. You killed him." That word cracked through the room like lightning. Vanessa covered her face and sobbed. Detective Keller stood at once. "Mrs. Mercer, I need you to stand up." She froze. "Stand up now." She looked at him, then at me, then at Daniel. Maybe she thought one of us would stop what came next. Maybe she thought tears still had power here. They didn't. She rose slowly. He guided her hands behind her back and spoke the formal words in a steady voice. He placed her under arrest on suspicion tied to fraud, conspiracy, and the unlawful tampering that may have led to Harold's death, pending full review and charges from the prosecutor. Daniel sat back down and started crying into both hands. I did not cry. Not then. I stood at the kitchen table and watched the woman who smiled at my funeral clothes and called me Mom while planning around my husband's death get led out of my house in silence. At the door, she twisted once and looked back at me. Her mascara had smudged. Her perfect hair had fallen loose. For the first time since I met her, she looked exactly like what she was, Not polished, not graceful, not misunderstood. Just a frightened woman who thought control was the same thing as strength. "Margaret," she whispered, "I never wanted this." I looked at her and answered with the plainest truth I had. "You wanted what belonged to other people, and you did not care what it cost." Then Detective Keller took her outside. The front door closed. The house went still. And only then did I finally sit down. I do not know how long Daniel and I stayed like that, in the wreckage of the kitchen with the coffee cold and the night nearly gone. At some point, Detective Keller came back in to collect copies of the papers and the flash drive. He was gentler then. He told us the investigation would continue. The man Vanessa had hired would be found. The mechanic records and phone records would be pulled. Laura Bennett's sealed packet would support the timeline. He said my husband had done something very wise by leaving such careful records. Wise. That sounded like Harold. Before he left, the detective looked at me kindly and said, "Mrs. Hayes, your husband tried very hard to protect you." I nodded. Yes, I said he did. After he was gone, Dorn began to lighten the windows a little. The black outside turned dark blue. Somewhere down the street, a bird started singing, as if the world had decided morning should still arrive. Daniel was still crying, quieter now, emptied out. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "I'm so sorry for all of it. For the lies, for the debt, for not listening to Dad, for not protecting him, for not protecting you. I believed he meant it. And for the first time in a long time, I also understood something important. Being sorry and being changed are not the same thing. Sorry is a beginning. Change is the proof." So I answered carefully, "I love you, Daniel. But love is not permission anymore." He nodded through tears. "I know. You will tell the full truth to the police." "I will. You will not touch one paper, one account, one property, or one key without my direct say." "I won't. You will face every debt you created honestly." He lowered his head. "Yes." Then I said the hardest thing a mother can say to her child. "And whether you stay in my life after this will depend on what kind of man you become from here." That broke him again. But it had to be said, because silence had already cost too much. Later that morning, I went to Laura Bennett's office with the box contents, the flash drive, and Harold's wedding band in my purse. Laura met me at the door before her assistant even had a chance. She took one look at my face and hugged me so tightly I nearly fell apart right there. In her office, she walked me through everything. Harold had moved the house, the garage, and most of the savings into a protective trust that Vanessa could not touch. He had named me sole controlling trustee. He had also left Daniel a path, not easy money, but a chance. If Daniel stayed honest, worked, repaid what he could, and remained free of fraud for 5 years, a modest fund would be released to help him rebuild. Harold had not abandoned our son. He had simply refused to reward his weakness. That made me cry at last, because it was so like Harold to leave both justice and mercy, but each in its proper place. The flash drive held more copies, emails, scanned records, voice notes Harold had dictated after meetings, dates, times, names, and one short recording made the day before he died. In it, Harold's voice was tired, but steady. If Maggie hears this, I need her to know 2 things. First, none of this is her fault. Second, if truth hurts our family, lies would have destroyed it. I pressed my hand over my mouth and wept. Laura wept, too. By the end of that week, the picture had become clear. Vanessa had been the driver behind the property scheme. She had found the private lenders through a cousin tied to shady bridge financing. She believed she could juggle paperwork, pressure Harold, and use fear to force access to family assets before the whole debt tower collapsed. When Harold refused and moved to protect everything legally, she panicked. That was why she rushed the bank after the funeral. That was why she kept pushing Daniel to stay quiet. That was why she came to my house that night, first pretending kindness, then throwing threats, then trying to regain control when she realized Harold had outplanned her from the grave. Daniel had not planned Harold's death, but he had helped build the disaster with lies, weakness, and cowardice. He signed papers he should never have signed. He allowed Vanessa to speak for him, hide things from him, and use family property as bait. He kept secrets when he should have spoken. Those were his sins, and they were heavy ones. The consequences came for everyone. Vanessa was charged. The investigation widened. The man who tampered with the truck was later found through phone records and payment trails. He admitted he was paid to create a mechanical problem, not to cause a fatal crash. But the Lord does not smile kindly on people who play games with brakes. The debt schemes and forged documents became part of the larger case. Daniel cooperated fully. He moved out of the house he shared with Vanessa. Their marriage ended slowly and sadly, not with drama by then, but with the dead quiet that comes when a lie has finally run out of air. He got a small apartment. He found steady work, humbler work than before, and for once in his life, he stopped talking about what he deserved and started facing what he owed. As for me, I stayed in my home. No one took my keys. No one touched Harold's garage. No one called me confused again. I visited the shop on Edgewater Road every week. At first, I only stood in Harold's office and cried. Then I started cleaning it out, not to erase him, never that, but to make room for truth. I framed one old photograph of him holding a young Daniel beside a truck with a hood open, both of them grinning like the world was simple. I kept that frame on the office desk. Months later, Daniel came with me one Saturday. He stood in the doorway a long time before speaking. I should have listened to him. He said, "Yes," I answered. He nodded. "I know." He picked up a rag and started wiping down a shelf without asking. We worked side by side in silence for a while. It was not forgiveness. Not fully. Forgiveness is not a switch. It is a path, and sometimes a very slow one, but it was a start. When we took a break, we sat on two old stools near the garage bay, and he looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and said, "Do you think Dad hated me at the end?" I thought about that for a long moment. Then I told the truth. "No, I think he was disappointed in you. I think he feared what you were becoming. But he still loved you enough to leave you one last way back." Daniel cried quietly after that. So did I. And in that little garage, with dust in the sunlight and old tools hanging on the wall, I finally understood the lesson this whole awful story had been trying to teach me. Love without truth becomes weakness. Silence protects the wrong people. And when someone shows you that they are willing to use family like a ladder, believe them the first time. But I learned something else, too. Being older does not mean being powerless. Grief does not mean being blind. And revenge, the kind that truly lasts, is not screaming in the dark. It is standing in the truth so firmly that the people who lied about you can no longer move you an inch. That was the revenge I got. I kept my homes. I kept Harold's wishes. I kept the proof. I kept my voice. And in the end, that mattered more than rage.